I've been part of this platform and in the background for about 10 fucking years now. 15 years on YouTube. You might go back to like the early days and some of the more earlier debates that, you know, to trace the link of one's feminist activism and such, but if you really did archive all the videos on my old channel, then you know that I've been pretty outspoken on women's rights for a number of years. So, you know, I thought that it was particularly timely because of the fact that I wanted to do a counter lecture to what my culture is basically trying to teach me, and really, I know that what I'm throwing under the bus here is America and its moral value system and its moral compass. This is an assault on America's. It's an assault on society to say these things. I get that, but I don't feel that society really merits a defense because it's just horrible. You're looking at a world and a culture that is like absolutely America through the eyes of somebody that considers themselves a foreigner who was born here. Your culture is trash. It considers sports, it considers the NFL more important than academic education. I can't even begin to describe how absolutely low bar and trashy that is. Like, it's almost as if I grew up in a civilization of primitive hicks, and they want to come and lecture me. They want to come and criticize me and such. I mean, like, you people are like anti-intellectual swine to me. So, anyways, you know, fierce, fresh, and feminist, Fern Riddle tells the story of the suffragette Kitty Marion in a way that fizzes, shocks, exciting, twisty, and very, very timely. I agree. Particularly with the race riots breaking out right now, this book just seems well timed. Because right now, most of the discussion it seems to want to center on the idea, fundamentally, that violence and a violent political tactic will not actually work. It's not a good or strong theory of change. That seems to be the message that society wants to tell us, and it's something that I'm finding out right now that the women's movement or the leaders, the former leaders of the feminist movement, or wanted to present a controlled and contrived image of women like the Pankhurst family and the suffragette movement. They wanted to present it through a very a very controlled lens, to say the least. They wanted to sanitize history and they wanted to remove, the element of violence that these women, participated in because, amongst other things, contextually, as she explains, as in her book, for the reasons, all the right reasons, really, but it's 2020 now, so there's no really good reason to not tell the full history of what happened. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the reason why this was covered up by actual leaders in the feminist movement was because they wanted to move on, which is I get it. You got your right to vote. You got what you wanted, so you might as well just move on and move past it. But see, the thing is that now that we're in the contemporary era, and women's rights seem to be completely under assault in modern society. You know, in particular, women and their issues and such. And I get it. I've been feeling just on an empathetic level the very strong suspicion that women are just fucking fed up. you know, very much in a state of very similar dark rages to the ones that I feel. Kitty Marion was sent across the country by the Pankhurst family to carry out a nationwide campaign of bombings and arson attacks as women fought for the vote using any means necessary. But in the aftermath of World War I, the dangerous revolutionary actions of Kitty and other militant suffragettes were quickly hushed up and disowned by the previously proud movement, and the women who carried out these attacks were erased from our history. Now, for the first time, the untold story will be brought back to life. Telling a new history of the women's movement in the light of the new and often shocking revelations, this book will ask the question: Why has the life of this incredible woman and the violence of the suffragettes been forgotten? And 100 years later, why are women suddenly finding themselves under threat yet again? So I haven't gotten to that part of the book, but I think that the premise is pretty much I suspected. This was a well-timed book, by the way, you know, because there are now riots breaking out over George Floyd and whatnot, and we have people who appear to want to lecture us and wave their fingers and tell us that violence will not get us change. But historically speaking, that's not the real lesson of history, now is it? Now, for those that will argue that violence merely results in a counter reaction and it just continues to escalate into an endless sea of violence, no, because in a lot of cases the victims are better people than, or maybe less violent people than the people that sent the bombs in the first place. The thing is, though, that when it comes to the collateral damage in these situations, it's almost as if society really doesn't have any reason to listen unless there is collateral damage. Sadly, they really pushed. They really made deeds, not action, a thing. They made you prove your commitment to the feminist cause with actual actions, and I've been trying, really. I mean, I would think that all the donations that I've made over the years have proven myself to some extent to actually believe in women's rights, at least, but people don't realize just how passionate I am about it, and I'm planting the seeds of this awakening because of the fact that I want to provide a perspective that is forbidden by my culture. You see, my culture wants to tell me that the only way to get change is to behave like Gandhi, who threw the British out of, India. But yet, historically speaking, Gandhi wasn't the only activist that got change. Over to, like, the Patriot movement at the founding of this country drove the British out of this country by means of force. The women's suffragette movement won their right to vote by any means necessary. There's a number, and if you want to say that it like I said, back to the original criticism though, that you want to say that it drowns out in a sea of just endless reprisals. Well, it's been 100 years, and has there been a backlash that has taken away women's right to vote from them after they won it? Did they just almost immediately rescind it? Did that actually happen? No, they can still vote 100 years later. So, QED violence appears to have actually worked and achieved something on this end. You know, but that narrative has been sanitized. And I think that there are a lot of good reasons for it. Like, for instance, the suffragettes didn't want, for instance, the people that had this history to come out because of the fact that they were still alive. It was still within the statutes of limitation. They weren't able to get away with it if these memories had been deliberately kept alive. What would have taken place was, in essence, a lot more convictions and such for all their actions and all the things that they did, all the terrible, all the things that society today considers to be so awful and inconceivable and such. This was a sanitized history. It was deliberately deprived of you, and in particular by some of the people that were in control of the movement. That's why the history only exists in archives and such. They're covered up. They've been covered up for a long time. The suffragettes, Riddle, Riddle, the Victorian Guide to Sex, refers to an overlooked story of Kitty Marion and the suffragettes that history often forgets. One such woman is Marion, and Riddle does a wonderful job of bringing her and the period at the turn of the 20th century to life. Marion, who employed arson and bombings to make her case, was instrumental in the cause for women's rights in both Britain and this country, enduring multiple forced feedings during her imprisonment. For a woman who sacrificed so much, history has spared the little of her. Riddle is changing that. Tell me, people want to say, that the women would have gotten the right to vote without her, and her violence, but at least we have somebody that's willing to come straight out the Library Journal and say that we probably wouldn't have, that she was instrumental. Everything about society today wants to condemn violence in every context, but it appears to actually work. If you want results against a system that just isn't paying any fucking attention to what you want and is ignoring you, it seems that it's a really good way to get it to start paying attention.